lawyer for the woman accusing Patrick Kane of sexual assault said evidence was tampered with. Now, her attorney said an empty evidence bag, which he said had contained the rape kit, was left in the doorway of the woman's mother's home. The Hamburg Police and Erie County Central Police Services in New York said all evidence has been accounted for and handled correctly. Kane's lawyer said that he welcomes an investigation of the bag incident since results of the DNA testing favor his client. No charges has been filed in this case yet. Kane went to training camp with the Blackhawks a week ago and made his preseason debut on Tuesday. Now, this isn't the first time Kane has run into legal issues. In August of 2009, Kane and his cousin were arrested in Buffalo after an altercation with a cab driver. Stephen A., are you okay with Kane playing during this investigation?
No, I am not. But it would happen to be because of the absence of an uproar over Patrick Kane. Now, let me be very, very clear. To my knowledge, he has not been charged. We understand that.
He has not been charged.
He has not been charged.
Yes.
That is entirely different from Ray Rice, who was charged. It is entirely different from Greg Hardy, who was charged. But to me, that's a legal issue as it pertains to law enforcement and what have you. My indictment is not against them. It would be against Patrick Kane if he is guilty of such acts.
Yeah.
He definitely needs to be in jail. If he is innocent of such allegations, then my apologies for even bringing up this subject, because it puts him in a national spotlight even more so. And if he is innocent, he doesn't deserve that. If he is innocent. Having said that, my issue pertains to this. The National Hockey League, men's tennis, the PGA have no domestic violence policies whatsoever. But everybody was up in arms when Ray Rice and Greg Hardy went down. Major League Baseball, which was sparked by the whole Ray Rice fiasco, suddenly implemented its own domestic violence policy. But according to numerous reports, numerous major leaguers over the years have been accused of or charged with domestic violence. And in the last quarter century, however, none has been punished on a league level. So let's add Major League Baseball to that list.
Okay.
Major League Baseball, even though they have a policy, okay, didn't have one. No league level, ramifications came down on players or managers, by the way, okay, because Bobby Cox, formerly of the Atlanta Braves, certainly had his issues. Nothing with the PGA, nothing with tennis, nothing with the National Hockey League. Does anyone see a pattern here? These are predominantly white-dominated sports. But when it comes to the National Football League and when it comes to the National Basketball Association, everybody is up in arms talking about there's an epidemic going on. Let's address it. Now, let me be very, very clear. I am a black man, unapologetically. I have never been involved in domestic violence in my life. I have never put my hands on a woman in my entire life. And I'm here to vouch for a vast majority of players in the National Football League and the National Basketball Association who happen to be black, who have never done such things. But when you see the few incidences that have taken place, and you see the uproar, and you see a nation standing up and saying this is a problem that we have to address, to the point where Roger Goodell's job was supposed to be on the line until the owner stepped up and said, we think he's doing a fine job, compelling Adam Silver to then step in and to make sure that something was implemented as it pertained to that, and that was publicized. You had two leagues in the United States of America that had to stand up front and center and say, this is definitely an issue that we will address. We have given it the attention that it deserves. But you have a guy who is a star in the National Hockey League who is being accused of such things, not charged, I understand that, but is being accused of such things. And I don't see an uproar. I don't see, I'm not saying it hasn't been reported. ESPN has reported it on SportsCenter. Yeah. Various publications have written about it. I'm talking about the public uproar when it comes to this. And I'm going to repeat this again. The National Hockey League, the Tennis Association, the PGA, and until recently, Major League Baseball, predominantly white sports, little to nothing going on here. We even have Gary Bettman on the record, Skip Bayless, on the record. I got to find this quote right here, because they said last September, Commissioner Gary Bettman for the National Hockey League took an active stance against domestic violence and sexual assault while speaking in Toronto. In the months since, he has expressed no interest in negotiating a domestic violence policy and a sexual assault policy with the NHL Players Association. And then the last paragraph of this article that I'm reading talks about Bettman has assured fans and the media that no new policy is needed because, quote, our players know what is right and wrong. That's his statement, and he gets away with this. What are we trying to say here? When people look around and they see a bunch of black men who have a problem with the society that we live in, when they see a bunch of black men who are talking about and alluding to the prevalence of racism, these are the kind of things that give those thoughts credence, because we're seeing stuff that's implemented disproportionately, and that's the problem. If this is good for the National Football League and it's good for the NBA, and black players are being labeled with insinuations and beyond because of the actions of a few, how did Major League Baseball get away with this all of these years? How are we not talking more about Patrick Kane? How is it that the National Hockey League, the Players, the Tennis Association, and the PGA have no policy whatsoever? And then you wonder why black folks get upset and they say, oh my Lord, maybe racism is still alive and well? Think about it. That's all I gotta say.
Wow. Well, I say amen to much of what you said. I appreciate that you did point out hasn't been charged. And just the only point of order I have in the bigger context is, did you have a problem with Jameis Winston being allowed to play at Florida State? He was not charged, remember, as they were investigating?
Right.
He continued to play games.
Well, he proclaimed his innocence, so I didn't have a problem with it, because my whole point is, again, I'm not questioning the legalities and how the legal system chooses to handle something.
Okay.
What I'm questioning, even more so than the institutions, I'm questioning the public uproar. Jameis Winston was in the news all the time.
Because he wasn't charged, though, that there wasn't the uproar. Because I sat in the meeting, just so you know, production meeting, you weren't in, Skip was there, and I said, how have we not covered this? And then one of our producers said he wasn't charged. And my thinking was same with you. Why is he being protected? They said he wasn't charged.
I think it's a fair, first of all, in favor
so if he was, would there be an uproar?
In favor to you, the producers, and white folks across this country, it's a legitimate question, and I understand that. I'm talking about the public outcry, because the mere insinuation in this day and age seems to create an uproar, but it seems more prevalent when it comes to young black males. And that is what I am saying. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about how it's handled in terms from a legal perspective. I do understand that. And institutions and franchises to some degree have to protect itself. But the leagues could do something if they were so inclined. But the NFL and the NBA feels compelled. Major League Baseball just followed suit after a quarter century of doing nothing. And we've got 3 major organizations that haven't done anything. That's a problem.
Clearly, hockey is living in the past here. Hasn't caught up to the times, in part because there hasn't been the outcry that you talk about, the outrage. But why is that in the larger issue? Well, clearly hockey in the United States, is it fair to say, is not as popular as football, basketball, and baseball?
That's fair.
Right? So has there been some outrage expressed in the city of Chicago? I think there has. And I think ESPN's Sarah Spain has expressed outrage publicly.
She has, and I applaud her for that.
And Christine Brennan wrote about it today in USA Today.
We're talking about the great Christine Brennan. I mean, come on now.
I am so with you. Patrick Kane, there should be a policy in place whereby he was suspended with pay. I'm okay with pay. Suspended with pay through this investigation. Can we make a case that he's getting preferential treatment in his hometown of Buffalo here? You could make that case given what you set this up with. And her attorney is now said, the victim's attorney, or the accuser's attorney is saying that, hey, this is a classic case of why so many victims are hesitant to come forward the way she's being treated right now. I don't know the details of it, but I get all this. That's why there should be a policy in place, and he should have been suspended from the start. But this is a hockey problem. I'm not sure it's a race issue as much right now. What we're talking about is a hockey issue. Is that fair to say?
Well, not for me, because I don't blame you for taking that position, but not for me, because what I'm seeing and what a lot of black males are seeing is that to some degree, black men could potentially be stereotyped by the actions of a few.
That's fair.
So it's
incredibly
important to us that when something else happens that doesn't involve black men, but it involves criminal activity, that gets highlighted and illuminated just as much, so we can understand it is a problem across the board, not just when it's pertaining to young black men, because you don't want to give that impression, because we got young black men on the come up who are obeying the law and are acting like civilized citizens, who are good young men who don't deserve to be stereotyped.
Okay, fair enough. Great. Now help me here, educate me to this question, because I don't know the answer to it. What would really be glaring, and since you brought it up, hockey has about 5% of its players are black out of, what is it, 600. So that's 30 out of 600. That's give or take a couple. Okay. 5%.
I didn't know it was that much, but go ahead.
So if one of those players had immediately been suspended with pay during an investigation, and then Patrick Kane wasn't suspended during an investigation, you could certainly cry race there, right? But that hasn't happened. That's not your point.
That's right.
Are you with me?
I'm totally with you.
That would be glaring. That would just be outrageous within the sport of hockey.
I'm not accusing hockey of protecting one of its own while throwing another of its own to the wolves. They have obviously, an absence of sensitivity to some degree as it pertains to this issue as a league. I believe that in this day and age, the PGA can be accused of the same thing based on the fact that they have no policy. And the ATP. What I'm trying to say, however, is this: as a black man, we recognize that it's hard out there, particularly when the actions of a few potentially taint the many and contribute to stereotypes we already believe was in existence for decades, if not longer. So when something happens with a Ray Rice or a Greg Hardy or somebody, and or a Jameis Winston, and that gets blown up and illuminated, but somehow, some way, Patrick Kane doesn't have to deal with the same level of scrutiny, and the excuse is because he's in hockey. You've got folks sitting there saying, well, wait a minute, NFL's predominantly black, and National Basketball Association is predominantly black. Okay, in Major League Baseball, even though there were a lot of white guys that were accused, you've got Dominicans or of a darker skin, but primarily it's America's national pastime, and it's a whole lot of white guys.
At least one white manager.
There you go, and at least one white manager. So you just arrived on the come up in the aftermath of the Ray Rice situation, and then you have these predominantly white sports with no policy. Let's make sure we understand here. Black folks are watching, and they're saying, excuse me, are we doing things and they're not? Or are we just the ones getting caught, meaning the few who did, while we're glossing over others who have done it? My props to Christine Brennan and Sarah Spain and all of them for bringing attention to it, because it's clearly not a race issue. But you have people that might interpret it as such when we only hearing black men being talked about.
I love what you said. This is a major reason I love doing this show with you, that you have the courage to step up to that plate and take that kind of stand. I respect that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen A., fair to say that the NFL, is a reactionary league?
Yes.
Yes, so hopefully maybe there's some reaction from these other leagues as well.
Maybe they'll learn to copy the NFL.
Right?
Yeah, maybe so.
All right, up next, we stay with the NFL. The league is still proving they haven't gotten over their Deflategate issues. Brady versus Big Ben. We'll explain that after the break.